How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Matt. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, not too bad. Welcome to Nicer Tuesdays.
Nice to be here.
And I'm sure many of the people in the audience today will know Lazy Oaf clothes. They'll probably have seen them around, even if they don't even know the brand. They'll have seen them out in the wild. But I wonder, most people probably won't know how the brand came about. So I thought maybe just to start off with, you wouldn't mind talking us through where the brand came from, where it started.
Yes, if I can go back that far into history. So back in 2001, I had just finished my course in textile design, and I didn't really fully understand what textile design was and what the opportunities were really out there in the world for someone that studied screen printing. So I was making T-shirts for friends at the time, at the end of uni. I was kind of sneaking screens and T-shirts and doing that. So there was a seed planted whilst I was trying to sort of build a professional portfolio and put myself out there in the world. And my portfolio was quite not commercial, to say the least. I sort of drew little figurines and characters and funny illustrations that perhaps weren't really suited to the commercial textile world. So I decided with actually a friend of mine to start printing T-shirts and maybe charging some money for them. And we started Lazy Oaf together, and I was bribing my print technician with bottles of red wine to expose some screens to me while I'd travel up from London, because I'm from London, back up to Nottingham, because I studied in Nottingham, to go and print a batch of T-shirts or whatever I could lay my hands on, and then come back to London and set up a market stall. So I was selling them on this market stall alongside some other questionable stuff. And that's a whole nother story. My market stall in Spitalfields Market, we started on a Thursday. It cost me a tenner, and whatever I made, I just went out and bought more blank T-shirts and screen printed them from a garage, my dad's garage, because I was living with my parents and working a couple of jobs. And it just very, very slowly grew from there.
It's an amazing story, and I guess, the kind of entrepreneurial spirit at the heart of it is really incredible. I feel like we could even go further back than that. I mean, we just saw a photo of you and your brother wearing some very sweet T-shirts when you were very tiny. But you grew up in a pub in Soho, right? And I guess you were kind of left to your own devices, is that fair to say? And that kind of fueled your creativity?
Yeah, I mean, my parents aren't in the audience. Yeah, let's get them. But so I come from, my dad's Irish and my mum was working as a nurse, and they started managing a pub in Soho, and so I was born in the very end of the 70s and grew up around that area in the early 80s, which was an experience in itself. But my parents worked super, super hard, really, really long hours. So me and my brother, to occupy ourselves, spent a lot of time watching VHSs, cartoons, and drawing to kind of keep ourselves out of trouble, although we were quite naughty as well. But the pub gave us, we were surrounded by characters, and also I'm from a massive Irish family, so a lot of family worked for us as well. So it was very much a family-orientated place, but everyone was grafting. I think I was probably doing the bottling up at 7 for 20p.
Amazing. I mean, that's kind of, I guess you talked us through how the brand started, and obviously the market stall was a massive, massive part of that. I guess since then you've really grown it into this, successful global fashion business, a business with creativity at the heart as well. How have you managed that, I guess, and what's the kind of philosophy behind building and growing Lazy Oaf been over the past 2 decades?
I think being creative is our heart. I say being creative is the heartbeat of Lazy Oaf. Without creativity, we don't really exist. Creativity is so important to me, and it's been so integral to me throughout my whole life. So I think that without that kind of like genuine connection with something that I do, I just don't think I would find the joy or the excitement or the motivation even to make it or grow it. So coming from sort of like literally drawing and screen printing my own stuff, if I'm not connected to that process, then I'm a little bit lost. I don't know if that answers that question, Matt.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think it's so clear that it's been, I mean, because we were also talking earlier about how at school, like actually creativity art class and being let into the art room after hours was like a big part of growing up for you. And it's always been this kind of, I guess, haven for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was given keys to the art department at school. I don't know how I managed to blag that, but it meant that I could sneak in and just like lose myself and hide away, actually. And we were talking earlier, it was like a refuge. Yeah. And it is for so many creatives, right? That you can, whatever's going on, that you can lose yourself in, I guess, like creating something.
I mean, we've obviously got some images behind us of lots of your work over the years. Lots of this is collaborations. I guess that's something you've become known for is really creative, innovative collaborations, not just with other fashion brands, but with kind of other, other kind of brands and logos almost. I guess one of them, which we've seen already, I think, was Batman, and that was in 2012. Just talk us through what that moment meant for Lazy Oaf, because it felt like a bit of a watershed moment for the brand.
Yes, that was, I would say, like our first big collaboration. And it started with, I don't know if we've seen a slide with a hand-drawn bat on at all while we've been talking, but I will presume that we have. I drew the Batman logo, but I wanted to do a bit of a riff on it. And the whole thing came about. It was like, I think someone much bigger and much more powerful than me is probably going to sue me for this. So I should probably look into just how I can go around that.
Just check,
Yeah, I should probably just check in. Yeah. And I contacted the licensees and had to really convince them that a small London brand could do something innovative and new with this concept and artwork. And it was, fake it till you make it is like my mantra. I'm not a confident person at all, but walked into a boardroom essentially and talked to a bunch of suits and just said, look, I know this is going to look amazing. Dream with me, guys.
That's so amazing. I mean, very, very impressive kind of bravery.
I think they probably felt sorry for me. Just like, let's just see what happens.
Do you think that would happen today? I mean, honestly, was that a kind of moment in time where, I don't know, it just felt like a bit more free to do that kind of thing with a logo like that?
Really, that kind of approach to a project just wasn't really happening. It was happening for kidswear in Tesco's, but it was quite rare to see it in streetwear and fashion in general, like that mid-level. And even it was, sometimes you might see it at a premium high level walking down a catwalk, and it was always like, oh yeah, that's incredible. But whereas now it's the market's so oversaturated, it's really difficult to know how to make a difference. And I think Batman for me is so nostalgic anyway, growing up in the 80s with a younger brother. Who only wants to talk about Batman.
Of course, yeah. Batman pajamas, we all had them. Yeah. I guess another very famous collaboration that you did was, I think this one was in 2016, was with kind of everyone's favorite surreal comedy, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Again, another kind of watershed moment for the brand. Could you just talk us through how that came about, how that began? Because again, I guess it summed up everything that Lazy Oaf is great at, right?
So that was a suggestion, actually, from one of our team. We pick projects that feel kind of really authentic to us. So what we're really into, what we care about, what makes us sort of snigger and smirk, and that is going to offer something different and completely fresh. And we had started talking about Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared at work, just because it was this such a bizarre viral video that we just completely resonated with, and was just thought it was brilliant. And we weren't sure how to make that into clothing or even how to translate that, but we just thought, this is 30 million people have viewed this video. There's got to be something also in this. Like, people are going to like the product if we make it, I'm sure. So we got in contact with Becky and Joe, and who are the nicest people in the world, and fashioned together a collection, which was really fun. And I think, like, looking back, looks pretty iconic. And little did we know how intense the fans were, the true fans were, and that collection is like gold dust. And
it's still being, I mean, people still ask for it, right? It's still kind of one of those
it's like one of the most requested collections ever.
I mean, how do you choose? You kind of gave us a little bit of a hint there, but like, you know, something that you've seen out in the world that has a bit of a, I don't know, a specialness to it. But how do you pick which brands or which, you know, people to work with? Because, I don't know, it just seems like there's such a unique approach there behind it.
With a lot of consideration. Right. Like, lots of people approach us, and I say no to more than I definitely say yes to. And we prefer to come up and with our own kind of like collaboration ideas, rather than, because then it's coming from a more genuine place, and it's either artists that we really, really love, or something that feels really genuinely nostalgic to us, or like fits the sentiment of Lazy Oaf's got a very particular sense of humour, I think. It's my sense of humour. So it kind of like, it has to connect. It has to connect to our story.
I mean, that's, it's interesting, because I guess I want to come on to the process of how a collection comes together, even from that very early, like, ideation or references stage, because I think there's so much to be said there. But I guess, I mean, we've talked about some collaborations with, I guess, non-fashion brands. You've also worked with a lot of fashion brands. You know, you partnered with Dr. Martens, Crocs, Umbro, I mentioned. I guess what have those collaborations allowed you to do that you maybe couldn't do on your own? And, I mean, is there something in the fact that, you know, Vans as well, like, there's something in there that there's a lot of footwear companies as well, I guess, and maybe footwear is not something that's easy to do on your own. Is that fair?
That's a very fair question. Yeah, those partnerships gives us the opportunity to go and play in with a product that we don't have the capabilities necessarily, or expertise, or skills. I love working with footwear because I am obsessed with shoes, and often think about my outfits from the shoe upwards. So, like, footwear gives me the opportunity to also be challenging for them to work with, because I ask all the silly questions and don't necessarily understand the rules. So we kind of like, it's a good process to be able to like use that to kind of get more creativity in. And some of these brands are much bigger than us as well, so it's given us an insight into how they operate, and has like definitely taught me a lot on like organizational structure. That might be the longest phrase I use.
I mean, I guess you mentioned there the scale of these brands. Is there a bit of a challenge there as well? Like, how do you stop feeling like the kind of the junior partner in a collaboration, or is that kind of a good place for you to be, really?
Oh, well, no, because I am quite controlling creatively, or can be, right, in a good way. And I think that's kind of like the pitch for us, I think, to work with those, is that we are going to bring a creative edge to that project. And so, like, before we embark, it's quite important for us to have those conversations of what our input and what our expectations and what we want to have our arms around, and then have a bit of negotiation. Yeah. Well, you want to sort of like build up a bit of trust and confidence as well. Like, you know, we've done this is what it's looked like before.
I mean, they're getting a lot out of it as well, right? That's, you know, you have that confidence of saying, we know that you're going to get a lot out of this as well. It's not just a kind of one-way street, right?
Yeah. I mean, you say that as a blag to begin with, and then and then you work it out.
do want to come on to that kind of talk, that discussion of kind of process and how you find your inspiration, because you very kindly shared with me your kind of internal company manifesto, and it's full of like photos and screenshots of, I guess, like funny, odd, amusing things that you've seen around the world, whether that's, you know, online or offline. Just talk us through what the kind of that process, you know, where does a collection start, and yeah, who's bringing those ideas to the table right at the beginning, and how are you choosing from those ideas, I guess?
It's kind of it has evolved as my teams have like changed and the way that we work has changed, but we try and work as collaboratively as possible at Lazy Oaf, and we like to theme our collections. So we have like a very clear starting point, and those themes are kind of ideated as a bigger team, and we pick how many, like where they sit within the year, and then it's like, so it could be, let me see what we work at, something like restaurant themed, or we did something called the Oaf license, or at the moment we're working on something called Once Upon a Time. So we have very clear themes and we build out our briefs from that, and we like to sort of make that inspiration as broad and as sort of strange as possible, and try and go to sort of like the corners of things, or go out and see things, or build huge mood boards. It could be kind of like random stuff that I've saved from Amazon, which might sound strange, but there's some really great product pictures that like sometimes inspire me. Yeah. That's really crap, isn't it, to say, like, I just go on Amazon and thank you.
But it is kind of looking in really odd places. I guess that's the point, right? You're not looking at fashion magazines.
Yeah, or music, or like even conversations at the bus stop, or like random things that you hear can just sort of like spark off like sketch ideas, or quite often if someone's sort of sitting near me, I'll be looking at what you're wearing and like, oh, that's interesting. That detail's really cool.
I mean, what's the process then from that point? Because I feel like, I mean, lots of people here will be, like me, really interested in the kind of creative process behind something like this. So you've got all of those references, all of those sketches, all of these interesting ideas. How do you then hone that and choose from that and kind of distill it into a collection that makes sense and still speaks back to that kind of broader theme at the top?
Well, workshopping a lot of ideas, doing a lot of sketches, tearing those sketches up, doing more sketches. I forgot that slide. Yeah, so we kind of, and we do selections, we sit around the table, we ask everyone in the team's opinion, do you like this, what do we think of this? We do have to bear in mind, unfortunately, commercialness, which is very frustrating for me. But we can't always do butts on T-shirts.
If only.
If only.
I mean, I guess there's something here for, I think, not just people working in fashion, but anyone working in any kind of creative discipline. That finding a unique style and a kind of unique tone of voice, which is something that you've done so well, and it's so identifiable, so identifiably Lazy Oaf when you see something. How have you managed to kind of create that tone of voice and I guess maintain it for, as we said, like, 2 decades? It's a really incredible achievement.
Yeah, it's not easy. I think that tone of voice, it's me. So Lazy Oaf is me. So I've had to kind of like try and translate my brain and the way that I see things, what we find funny, and surround myself with people that get it, and find that affinity, because there's no sort of like strict rule book of what it is. It is it sounds really pretentious, but it is a vibe. That you can't get into Oaf without. But everyone has like a similar sense of humour. None of us are pretentious. We all take a very like sort of sleeves up approach to what we do, and we try and be as honest as we can in how we work, and hopefully that humour is essential to getting through everything. Yeah.
I mean, that humor definitely comes across, and that's such a big kind of pillar of your tone of voice. Is there a point, I mean, is there a balance to be struck, I guess, with when you update or how much you update that tone of voice? Or do you think that is something that you can really say from day one it hasn't changed? I mean, like, is that something that you have to evolve over time a little bit? Or
Oh,
is it just the DNA?
Yeah, I think I'd love to say it's just been like that the whole time, but when I go back and read like blog posts from 2009, I am dying inside. So it's definitely evolved. As that you evolve as a human as well, I think what I found funny back then is really not okay anymore.
Right, yeah. I mean, you've talked about humor, and I guess one place that comes across really, really well is in your social media. And I think, you use your social media presence not just as marketing. It's not just about selling clothes. I think it's very much about building a kind of community and building a community of people who I guess like share a lot of those, that sense of humor. How important do you feel community is now to kind of modern fashion brand? I mean, it definitely wasn't 10, 15 years ago, right? You just bought some ads and you you sold some garments. But now it's much more about kind of building that community, isn't it?
Yeah, communities. I think you don't have a brand unless you have a community right now. I think community was like so important to how Lazy Oaf has even got to 20 odd years old. We used to have like big exhibitions and parties and events all the time. Couldn't afford to do them, but it was like the way that I could meet attractive people and get drunk. And it just say and draw stuff, which is like brilliant, all my favourite things. And so we built a community that way, and a really lovely creative network as well. And I like that's something that has always remained important, is that sense of connection with the people that you're creating with and creating for. And if you don't have that connection, like how do you understand what's going to work, or what's going to be any good and relevant?
I mean, yeah, that totally makes sense. One of the things that I guess, I mean, we've talked about this before, but there's lots of different challenges of getting to the scale that you are now, and I guess one of those is you actually start to see people maybe aping your style a little bit, or kind of copying what you've done and copying that tone of voice, which is something that's as we've mentioned, kind of very unique. How do you deal with that? I mean, do you kind of just brush it off and say, oh, there's going to be copycats, we can't do anything about it? Or how does it affect you creatively? What are the challenges around that?
It's not nice when someone copies you. I think we can all agree. And it's something that's happened to us a lot. And something that I used to take massively personally. Probably like a few years ago. It's one thing when it's like another small label or another artist, and it's a completely different feeling when it feels like it's a bigger business that is that doesn't give a shit. And there are things that you can do about it, and there's definitely times where I've seen some very questionable stuff on the high street and had to kind of like approach lawyers and solicitors and get advice and kind of do cease and desist and all of that. But there's also times where we've been like on the other side of that situation, right? Where we have unintentionally, we've produced a product that might have a similarity to someone else. So I feel like there is a real kind of like, I feel really sensitive about this subject actually, because it's really not nice being the person that it's happened to. So I can kind of like empathize and also unintentionally been the person that has done that to someone else, which feels awful, but we are all kind of at some point subconsciously getting all of this reference points, right? The same reference points, the same, yeah. Actually, they should really have a word with me.
Yeah, I was going to say. Go on.
That's my best joke.
I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. For the tape, it says Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is. I think it's great that you're honest about that because I think it's probably something that, yeah, lots of people don't talk about actually. Is both sides of that as well. So yeah, no, I appreciate you talking about that. You talked there a little bit about, I guess, standing up to bigger brands and these, enormous corporations. I mean, one thing that you did, I think, during the pandemic, or at least relatively recently, was take Lazy Oaf out of wholesalers and take it, I guess, yeah, go back to being very much in control of where you were selling and selling basically directly. Do you want to just talk us through why you did that, what was happening that made you make that decision? Because quite a big decision to go to take it out of 150 stores or whatever it was.
Yeah. We were stocking at one point over 150 like global stores, like a mix of independents, really cool shops, some really not very cool shops. We were working with like big brands like ASOS, Urban Outfitters, an American site called Dolls Kill, and it was kind of like over half of our business actually. And the pandemic hit. I mean, my dream was like, actually one day I just don't want to be working with these people, because when you enter relationships with some of these bigger brands, you are kind of working for them, and it's what their consumer wants, what's selling, and it's all on their terms. So the pandemic hit, nobody knew what the hell was going on. I was getting phone calls, cancelled orders that were worth hundreds of thousands of pounds at the time. And my business was being held to ransom, basically. And I was just like, I just don't want to operate like this. I don't want to work for ASOS, and I don't want to work for Urban. If I wanted to do that, I'd go and get a job, thanks. I've built my own business to kind of, I have to tell myself this. I don't just like know all of this in my head. I have to convince myself. And so we made that D2C pivot. And we started to shut down our wholesale business and sell directly to our community of oafs online and through our stores, which is a massive risk, especially when we didn't know what the hell was happening. But it felt the right thing to do, and I got control of my brand back.
Yeah, amazing. I've got one final question from me, and then we'll go to some questions from the audience, which I haven't forgotten about. But I guess it really, that story you've just mentioned really kind of resonates with this. You said something over email, which was that you didn't feel as though you were kind of purpose-built in a factory to be a boss or to be a CEO, and it's something that you've had to learn along the way. Yeah, maybe could you just talk us through that? Because I think I don't know, I just think that whole story you just mentioned kind of resonated with that.
Yeah. Yes, I think I've probably got imposter syndrome times 1,000. But yeah, I mean, I started this out of uni. I'd worked in retail, behind the bar, and in a kitchen, and in Sainsbury's. So I hadn't had any boss-like experience, really, apart from seeing my mum and dad work, which was really, really inspiring. But yeah, I don't know how to run a business. I don't know what being a CEO is. So every day is like a learning day or a school day, and definitely I'm not your typical boss. My team will attest to that. I very much have built a business and a brand around me and how I like to work, and how I like working with a team. So it's also got to sort of like manage like how I am as a person and how I like to create, and not that I haven't got sort of like good life-work balance or anything. I've got no like she boss, girl boss advice.
That is very funny because the first question is from Eleanor, and it's advice for people wanting to set up a startup.
Oh, right. Yeah, don't.
Is that next question?
I think, wow, oh my God, I think if you're starting up now, there's so much stuff out there, so many people doing like amazing stuff. So I think it's so important to know what your product is, who you are making and creating this product for, and like, how's it going to change their lives, and how's it going to change your life? You have to know, like, you can't just be nice and you think some people are going to like it. You really need to sort of like do your homework, I think, because it is sort of a big, hungry world that might eat your product up, but might eat you up as well. That's a bit dark, but it is quite competitive, I think. So yeah, your proposition has to be pretty unique, I think. So you need to know it and back it.
The next question comes from Percy. What inspired your brand ethos?
Me, and actually, yeah. I was gonna say, I've decided not to tell that story.
I'll go on.
When I first started Lazy Oaf, I was going to call it Fat Trucker, which was kind of like, not me, but me. And then Lazy Oaf was like the second option. I thought that kind of summed up my approach to life and my love of trash and, junk food stuff. So I think that's the ethos of Lazy Oaf, is like creativity, hard work, being funny, finding kind of like the playfulness and stuff, and it's essentially me trying to put that bit out into a business.
I can say I'm quite happy that it's Lazy Oaf and not
Yeah, me too,
Fat
because
Trucker.
people call me Lazy Oaf, right? And I don't want to be like, oh, Fat Trucker. I prefer Oaf.
Yeah, exactly. This question comes from Mary. How do you find the inspiration/motivation to keep making work when work gets busy? Sorry, keep making when work gets busy.
Oh, that's really hard. Yeah. So the joy for me in everything that I do is when I get to draw or be creative or come up with ideas. And quite often work does get in the way. But that has to be like, sometimes that's just the priority or what needs to happen on that day. So I love ideas. I love collaboration. I love workshopping stuff. So actually, when I kind of like need that motivation hit, I will probably drag people into a room and just say, let's get around the table and talk about some things. And that seems to sort of like re-spark some energy. And also end up doing, this is why going back to like the work-life balance, because I love drawing and being the creative bit, quite often I end up doing those bits in my free time because I just love them. And that I miss doing them, which is not a great example to set, but is how I try and squeeze that bit in.
Yeah. Well, you've got to. I mean, if it's your passion, I guess that's what you've got to do, right?
Yeah.
But, yeah. Work-life balance, as you said, is maybe the
Yeah, and
the
it
thing
really
that
needs to
suffers.
work on it. Yeah.
One final question from Martina. How do you push your work and not stay stagnant? Really good question. And I guess, again, something that kind of probably across creative disciplines people will understand, how do you push your work further?
Sometimes I really like narrowing the inspiration source or like giving yourself like really strict parameters. And that's also why I like collaborations, actually, because sometimes you're given like loads of things that you can't do, which I think makes you more and more creative. You've got to think harder about stuff. So I think my biggest drive for Oaf is like to keep getting kind of better, keep thinking of new things all the time. I have maybe an overactive imagination, but that's definitely a driver on like, well, why can't we do a car? Or like, like these silly ideas. And I don't think that any idea is a silly idea until you've sort of explored it and exhausted it and then defeated by it. Or
A Lazy
succeed
Oaf
in it. Yeah.
car. Wow.
Yeah, that would be very
That
good.
sounds amazing. When
Yeah.
can we make that happen?
I don't know.
Gemma, thank you so much. I'm
You're
afraid we're out of time, but thank you for your time today. And
Thank
everyone, Gemma from Lazy Oaf, thank you.
Thank you so